Hello, my name's Tom Seidner, and I'd like to welcome you to this video, The Anatomy of an Array. So we learned in a previous video, Anatomy of a Variable, that what a variable was, and just as a recap, this could represent a variable of a string called myString, and this could represent a variable that's an int of x, and we put values into those variables. In this case, Bill, and in this case, 6. Alright? So these variables have a name, they have a type, and they hold a value. Okay? So if these are variables, what is an array? Well, let me show you the cup representation of an array. This would be the cup representation of an array. So an array is a variable that can hold a lot of different values. So we could say that we have an array of string called myString, but in this case, instead of being a single variable, it is an array. So each one of these items in the array has an indices, and that indices tells us which one of these items we want to either put something in or reference. Now, our arrays in most languages start at 0, so this one here would be my stuff, index 0, and we could put Bill in there. Now, even though Bill's in there, we could put something else in the next one. So this next one here would be represented as my stuff, index 1, and we could put Tom in there. And so on and so forth. We could fill up this entire array with names, having as many names in the array as there are indexes in the array. In this case, we have 25 items in the array myString. So we could put 25 different items in each one of these by referencing the index to put the stuff in or to take the stuff out. So in order to put something into index 0, then we could say something like my stuff 0 equals Bill. My stuff 1 equals Tom. My stuff 2 equals whatever string we wanted to put in there. And we could fill the entire thing up just like that. In Java, it looks like this. And in C++, it looks like this. And in Python, it would look something like this. So once we have the array filled up with values, then we want to be able to get the values out. So in order to get the values out, we just do the same thing that we would do with a normal variable, except for we would include an index in the reference. So we would say nameString equals myString index 1, and we would get the value Bill. If we said nameString equals myString index 1, then we would get the name Tom. And so on and so forth through this entire array. It looks something like this in Java, this in Python, and this in C++. Now, because we have multiple items in this array does have some bounds. So the lower bound of this array is 0. We can't store anything below 0. And the upper bound of this array is 24. So if we're putting things into this array, we cannot put anything into myString index 25 because that would be outside of our array, and we will get an out of bounds error. Even though we had 25 items in this array, the reason we can't put something in index 25 is because the array starts at 0, and therefore the top bound of the array will be 24. So just remember, if you make your array 25 items in size, that you can only put things in index 0 through 24. In order to declare an array, you declare it something like this. In Java, you would use this notation. And in C++, you would do it sort of like this. And in Python, you would do it like this.
Now, Python is a little bit of a special case because Python actually doesn't have arrays. It has what's called lists. Lists are an object that are available in C++ and Java as well. But since Python doesn't have an array object, it kind of uses a list to pretend to be an array. And in this case, you have to declare the array or list as it is to have items in it. And to do that, you have to actually put items in it. So here you can see that I have an array called my stuff, and it has 1, 2, 3, 4 items in it because I declared it by putting those items in when I created it. Now, this array actually has a lower bound of 0 and an upper bound of 3, and it has 4 items. So if I would try to run this with a 4 in here, it is going to be out of bounds. So I'm going to do that and show you. And as you can see, the error down here is telling you that the index is out of range. Now, if I wanted to do the same thing I did with the Java and the C++ in the previous examples, I would have to actually go ahead and put items in here all the way up to 25. Now, the items don't have to be numbers. Don't get confused by that. They can be anything. And in fact, in this case, it's an array of string. So I want to make sure I put strings in there. But I would have to have 25 items in this to actually have a string of 25. So keep that in mind when you're making arrays in Python that have a set number of items in there. You have to actually declare it by putting something in each item. Now, also, once you run this, if I tried to get 4 now, it would have the F in there. It wouldn't go out of bounds now because I added that item in there, but now it would have the F in there unless I changed it to something else. And there you go.
You can have arrays of many different variable types. It doesn't just have to be strings. So we could have an integer array. The integer array will work exactly like the string array that we just gave an example of, except for you would declare your array as an integer instead of a string. So in this case, we have the integer x. That integer x will be an array of integers with x as the name, and then indices to go along with that. So we would have x0, x1, x2, x3, and so on and so forth, all the way up to x24. We could put different integer values into each one of these indices of the array. So in x0, I could have 6. And at x1, I could have 1. And I could continue filling up this array all the way up to indice 24. Now remember, if I try to put something in indice 25, I will get an out of bounds error from the program when it's running. Declaring an integer array is very similar to declaring a string array, something like this in Java, this in C++, and this in Python. Now, let's take a look at some programs that use arrays.
So here's a sample program in Java. This is a very simple program. What it does is it declares an array of integer that has 25 items in there. We take the array, which is called myInt, and we, at indice 0, insert the number 16, and then we print out the number 16 that is now at indice 0 here. And so if we run this, it just prints out what is at indice 0, which is now 16. Now, when it comes to arrays, arrays work very closely hand in hand with loops, and so we can actually use loops to fill our arrays. So in this case, we have 25 items in our array, so we can go ahead and create a loop to loop 25 times and fill up that array with different numbers. So let's just do this. Let's just say 4, and we're going to do integer x, and we're going to make that equal to 0 to start with. And then we'll say x is less than 25. We're going to do something, and then we're going to just go ahead and increment x there. And there's our for loop. And we can go ahead and use this for loop to fill up our array. So we're going to cut our array here, put it inside our for loop, and then we can say that the indices of x which now we're using our X from our for loop for our indices, and it will start at 0, and then it'll go to 1 and 2 and 3, and it'll go all the way up to 24, which is what's less than 25, filling our array with different numbers. And then we can actually just do, if we want to make certain numbers, we can do X, which will just fill our indices with 0 through 24, or we could do some kind of mathematical calculation. We could do X times 2, and then we would get the 2 multiple of 0 through 24. And if we run this now, it will go ahead and it will fill the entire array with numbers, but it's still only going to print out what's at indices 0. So let's go ahead and run that. And you can see that we get 0 because 0 times 2 is 0. And that's what we wanted to see. If we change this indices to, let's say, indices 16, we're going to get whatever's in the 16th spot of our array. So let's go ahead and run that. And we get 32 because in the 16th spot of our array, we have 16 times 2. So now, if we wanted to actually print out everything that's in our array, we could use another loop. And we could use the exact same loop. So we could actually just duplicate this. And within this loop, we could do a print. Now, I could do this within the same loop, but I want you to see that I'm filling the array here and I'm printing the array here in 2 separate processes. Because once you fill the array, all the items stay in the array until you change them. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this, put this inside my loop, and I'll run this now. And now it will go ahead and print out all of my numbers from the loop. So let's run it. They're probably going to be more than what will fill the screen. So I'll probably have to scroll to show you all of them. Now, as you can see, this didn't work exactly as I said, but this is good to point out, is that I told it to print the indices 16 25 times. And that's what it did. It printed out 32 25 times. But that's not what we want. We want it to print out the indice X here. So we need to change this to X. And that'll print out, starting at 0, it'll print the 0 indices, and then the first, and then the second, and then the third, and the fourth, all the way up to the 24th indices. And so now let's run it again, and we should get some better output. And as you can see, I have to scroll this, but as you can see, it started at 0, went to 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, all the way up to the end, which is 48. So there you go. You can see that you can use for loops to load up your arrays, and you can use for loops to pull data out of your arrays. Remember, when you're doing that, you want to change the indices every time. Here we're changing the indices to the X value, which is getting iterated within the for loops. So here we have a similar program in C++. As you can see, I've declared an array of myInt with 25 indices. I've done a for loop to fill that array with X times 2. And then I've done a for loop to print that array using myInt X, as X is the indice to print. And as you can see, I get a printout with my 0 through 48 here. So this is how you would do it in C++. And then in Python, it's a little different because I have to go ahead and declare my array with something in each item. And since this is an integer, I'm filling that with integer items. The numbers 1 through 25. Now I'm going to replace those items that are in here to start with the 25 from this loop. So I'm looping 25 times, and then I'm taking the X, which is 0 through 24, and multiplying it by 2 and putting it into myInt. And then I'm also looping again 25 times and printing those out. And so I am getting 0 through 48 here. And so it is very similar to do these type things in both C++ and Python.
So that's it. That's arrays. I hope you guys enjoyed learning about arrays, and I hope you understand now how to use them in your programs. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to email me and ask them, or put comments in the location below, and I'll try to answer them as soon as possible. Arrays are very powerful, and they're very useful when used in conjunction with loops. So use arrays in your program, write good programs, and until I see you guys again, happy programming.